I didn't know that you were a psychology major and also German literature. So you're fluent in German, huh?
So, funny story. When I was a little girl, I actually spoke better German than English. Because I was living in Germany.
Yeah.
And so, when I moved from Germany to Indonesia, I actually struggled in school because I didn't speak English very fluently at the time.
When did you move
But
here?
then, when I was like 11.
Okay.
But then, what's funny was, obviously, like most teenagers, I wanted to fit in. So I started speaking English, and my dad was like, you know what, we're going to speak English at home because I want you to be able to communicate with your friends.
Right.
So then we started speaking English at home, and ta-da, like a lot of third culture kids, you start getting used to it, and then you stop speaking the other languages.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I speak German fluently on a colloquial level. But I think now that I don't use it as much, I wouldn't feel comfortable speaking it formally anymore. But with that being said, that's actually one of the reasons why I took German Lit as my major.
Because you wanted to improve your German, get back to being good at speaking German.
That, but also read classic literature in its original language. You know, I think that's very important because as much as, you know, translators try to stay true to the original language of a certain piece of literature, it's still going to change to an extent, you know? You can't expect it to be verbatim exactly as the original language.
Right, yeah.
Some things are going to be adjusted to make it more easily understood in the translated language. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
Which is why I feel like it's so dangerous when people don't understand, let's say, the Holy Scripture in its original language and like read its translated form. I think, you know, then I wonder, like, are we really reading what was written 2,024 years ago or 1,400 something years ago or 3,000 plus years ago of whichever Holy Scripture people read at home?
And
You know, there must have been some modifications that have occurred over the course of thousands of years.
Right. No, and then like especially with like certain texts, it's like it's been revised and like reinterpreted by like several individuals throughout history. Like, and what you think that there's not going to be like some like dilution of like the original meaning, and like also the elimination of like the original context and all that type of stuff too is like super important. And people don't really think of that when it comes to historical texts.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I feel that with Indonesian, like as my Indonesian started getting better, and like there are certain things that in the Indonesian language that there are a lot of things in the Indonesian language that you can't really get the full meaning of when like you say it in English, and like with English especially vice versa.
I feel like with English you can be really concise, but with Indonesian you might have to go around in tangents to prove the same point because otherwise it might not be as easily understood by people.
No, and I was telling Chucky about this.
Our English literature major.
Our English. I wonder how many people know that about. Si Chucky Pardede dulu kuliahnya itu sastra Inggris. Wow, I never would have expected that from Chucky. But anyways, I was telling Chucky that the thing that I noticed about the English language and how different it is from the Indonesian language, and it actually ties to like our topic for today somewhat, that English is actually the language of precision, whereas Indonesian is the language of convenience. And I get this comment a lot whenever I speak in Indonesian. I don't know about you, but the way that I tend to speak in Indonesian is that I basically like Google Translate English sentences and just like switch the vocabulary to Indonesian. So it follows like a very English style of like the grammar and like the sentence structures and all that. And so the comment that I would get from a lot of Indonesians is, you know, I understand what you're saying, tapi kamu ngomongnya tuh berbelit-belit.
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot, right? And I'm like, emang really like berbelit-belit ka? Because like that's how we talk in English. But then, you know, then I started realizing like whenever we talk in English, we prioritize the precision of like retelling, like for example a certain story, making sure that like you really get like all of the details in there. And then with Indonesians it's usually like
You scratch the surface.
Yeah.
My Indonesian has gotten exponentially better over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, and it's in part due to the fact that I did exactly what you did, meaning translate English to Indonesian via Google Translate. But by doing so, a lot of people have actually mentioned that they feel like the way I speak, the way I convey my opinions is very structured, and I think it's because I do use the English template. But when I am at like government events or Indonesian universities, I use that English template, but then like substitute the words into Indonesian, and it actually makes people really understand the point that I'm trying to convey, and it actually gives them a new understanding of whatever we're discussing. So it's not a bad thing at all.
Right. But actually, somewhat tying to today's topic, sometimes I feel like that might be the issue when it comes to speaking in Indonesian and trying to convey certain things to Indonesians, because like sometimes my friend, shout out to Angelica, because I know you're going to be watching this. My friend Angelica, she said this, bahasa Indonesia itu sebenarnya bahasa yang miskin kosakata, and it's very true, especially compared to languages like Arabic, English. Like Indonesian is very poor in vocabulary. So it's like a combination of the culture of like convenience, right? It's like a multitude of like factors like stacked on top of each other, where it's like you have the culture of convenience. How do I relay something as quick as possible, as convenient as possible, because I'm lazy? I'm sorry, but that's true. We're a lazy culture. We're a santai culture, right? And then on top of that is also that we deadass lack words.
Yeah.
And so I think about how much of that gets in the way when it comes to wanting to talk about, dare I say, like, you know, bigger ideas, or maybe like talking about more especially difficult concepts, and you know what I mean?
And I think that's why a lot of the intellectuals in this country over the course of time have gradually used some English terms to convey certain ideas, because like mindfulness, you know, it's a concept that's been around for a while, but only something that people have been talking about recently, I guess, in Indonesian pop culture. But how would you describe mindfulness in Indonesian? You'd have to give give a long definition to really explain what mindfulness is. There is no one word to describe mindfulness in Indonesian.
Yeah, I was talking.
Kesadaran.
No, kesadaran is like
awareness. But still,
awareness, yeah.
But still, it takes awareness to be able to be mindful.
Yeah.
So it's a part of mindfulness, but it's not enough to describe the word mindfulness.
Aduh, aku lupa. I went on Kemal's podcast, and we were talking about exactly this. We were trying to translate the word nuance.
Oh.
Nuance.
How do you...
So, but Mela's in the back, by the way. Mela's back again.
Hi, guys.
Yeah. I don't think they can hear you because this mic is like super. Okay. Yeah. But yeah, nuance.
I'm really...
Right.
Let's see what Google Translate says. Nuance. And we'll see whether that really describes nuance. Nuance in...
And what's so funny to me is that there's no Indonesian word for nuance. Actually, no.
Nuansa.
Ya kali nuansa.
Perbedaan kecil. That's what Google Translate says.
See? There's no... Any of you guys that are listening to this, and obviously y'all probably like, yeah, most likely understand English, like, yeah.
Yeah.
And we know what nuance means.
Yeah.
Like to approach like conversations and like to like take into consideration the nuances, the caveats of it. And I think a lot about how we don't even have that word in the Indonesian language, and that's probably like to some extent why it translates into like the real world, why a lot of Indonesians struggle to view things through like a nuanced lens.
Nice play on words there.
Am I making sense?
You know, you are making sense, and I think your point's completely valid, but I think we have to be careful when we talk about things like this, because, you know, just like any other country in the world, we cannot deny that there are definitely a lot of very intelligent, successful people in this country. Of course, there are a lot of not so intelligent people as well, but, you know, I can name a few names of people who are really bright and I enjoy talking to, and I'm like, wow, like, we do have some great people in this country.
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
I think oftentimes as third culture kids, we either live abroad or then study abroad. And then when we return, we expect people to understand our worldviews. We expect people to see the world the way we do. And we expect our ways to work back in our home countries. I don't think that's fair. You know, I used to be, don't get me wrong, when I came back to Indonesia 5 years ago, I was like, oh, why is it so difficult here? Why don't people just get it? Like, it's so obvious. But I've had to let my ego down in the last couple of years, because I've realized that most people are not privy to the kind of lives we lived growing up. Most people don't have access to the facilities we had growing up. And so if we want Indonesians to eventually see the world the way we do, not that they have to, I'm not saying that our worldview is by any means better or or
more sophisticated.
More sophisticated. You can't think that way. You know,
No.
that's not fair. It's like, you know, it's like the colonizers back in the day saying that, let's say, the countries they colonized were backwards, even though you can't say that. They had their own philosophies, you know, they had their own ways of thinking, their own ways of living. But my point is, if we want, let's say, Indonesians, your everyday Indonesian way of thinking to develop,
Right.
we need to be able to communicate our ideals, our values, but in a way that's non-threatening to their worldview. Because when your worldview is being threatened, you're gonna be averse to whatever someone's trying to tell you.
Yeah.
You're gonna try reject
Yeah.
what they want to tell you, and that's not what we want. We don't want them to think, oh, look at Indah and Cinta trying to change things, thinking that they're
Yeah.
better. You don't want that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure that both you and I, we're not perfect beings whatsoever. There are so many things that we can change about ourselves, but I do believe that you and I have. Several similarities, but one of them wanting to help young Indonesians develop the way they think, help them become more critical in the way they think, help them become more creative in the way they think, and obviously help them become more analytical in the way they think.
Right.
But we can't force our ways upon them, because at the end of the day, again, we were educated differently, we lived in different places, so we need to meet them halfway, meaning see the world through their eyes, but at the same time figure out a way that we can like impart our knowledge on them and let them make up their own minds. You know,
Right.
You and I might believe that thought A is the right thing. We can present thought A to these people, but we can't force thought A upon them. You get what I'm saying?
No, I 100%. I think about that a lot of like people like you and me, especially, like we can't come over here to the eastern part of the world and like start imposing our Western beliefs, right? Like I'm very hyper conscious of that. Whenever I like, you know, talk about certain values or opinions, and like I bring about like certain like concepts that are obviously like very Western, and you know, like what you were to add on to what you were saying, it's also how do we relay it to a lot of Indonesians, like, you know, to think more analytically, more critically, relaying all of that in a non-threatening way, but at the same time, like being brutally honest.
Yeah.
Being brutally honest, because like
Absolutely.
I think I'm going to guess that there's going to be a lot of clicks on this episode, not just because like obviously it's with you, but I think it's also because this is a conversation that a lot of people behind closed doors, like we've been know about it, like we've been thinking about it, and like we see it, and nobody really like wants to explore this topic on like a much deeper level. And actually one of the questions that I wanted to explore today with you is you were saying about education, and clearly, and it's no secret, we even went to the same high school.
Yes.
Have you been back since you graduated?
Once.
Same. And then after that, nope.
Not yet.
No.
Wait, before you ask me this first question, can I just say what's so funny is I think it's kind of ironic. We talk about minorities a lot, but I feel like in this country there's actually there's actually a silent majority, meaning people who may share our views and our beliefs, but don't speak up because they feel like they won't be heard and what they say won't change anything, which is super dangerous. And I love what you said about, you know, speaking your truth, because you're doing it in your own way. You're conducting podcasts in English, which caters to, as I said, internationally educated Indonesians.
Western
but maybe
media
what I'm
literate.
doing with Puella, which, by the way, you guys, Indah's going to be on it really soon. But what I'm doing with Puella, my digital platform, is, as I said, I'm letting my ego down. I'm trying my best, to the best of my abilities, to speak better Indonesian so that I can reach out to young Indonesians who may live outside of big cities like Jakarta and Medan and then Surabaya and what have you, because I want them to be privy to the information that we're sharing. They don't have, again, they don't have to believe in my beliefs, but at least they're privy to the information so that they hopefully they can make up their own minds as to what they want to believe, and at least they have the tools to be able to combat or overcome whatever struggles they may be going through in their community, in their hometowns, whatever that may be. Because, you know, you talk about taboo and sensitive things. I do the same, but in a way that's palatable.
Yours is definitely much more digestible because it's like where you are strong, where what you are strong at that I am weak in is being able to deliver information and messages in a way that is going to be palatable to most people. And you're very good at being diplomatic. I am not.
I don't think I'm diplomatic per se, because one more thing I'd like to add was 3 years ago, I did a speech on radicalism and terrorism at the Ministry of Religion. So literally to these Islamic scholars and religious leaders, I was stating my opinion as to why I believe that radicalism is in flux in this country.
How tight were your ass cheeks clenched up on that stage? When you were doing that?
To be honest, I was not nervous. My manager was sitting in the crowd and she was like, "Oh my God, I really hope we don't get stoned to death after this."
Yeah.
She was so scared, and I was like, "What is there to be scared of?" And what I've you know why I wasn't scared? Because I'm not saying I've mastered this art yet per se, but I've realized that you can convey a problematic or an unpopular belief as long as you know what type of diction to use.
Yep.
And as long as you don't condemn or belittle any party.
Yeah.
As long as you're not saying, "Oh, that person's wrong. This is happening because of that group. This religion is that and that person is that." As long as you're not trying to bash anyone and you're just being purely objective and saying, "This is what's happening and this is what we can do to mitigate the problem." People are actually very welcoming and accepting.
And the both of us were social media personalities. Do you feel like social media is a conducive space for that to occur?
I want to say no, but at the end of the day, I have to say yes. Because what makes me sad is, to this day, even with the anti-sexual violence law that we finally have since 2022, a lot of cases still have to go viral in order for law enforcers to take it seriously.
Yep.
So at least in this country, actually, no, I think globally, social media is the platform to really get people to notice.
I mean,
things.
and don't get me wrong. I'm not saying social media is the fucking evil of the earth and must be abolished or whatever. Social media, when used for good by good people, can achieve very wonderful things, and I 100% stand by that, right?
Yeah.
But there is definitely a part of today's conversation is, I think, also exploring when it comes to critical thinking skills, or more so lack thereof. There's a lot of research that points towards how social media has exacerbated the ability to critically think, especially, I think, one element of social media. This is probably where, because I just found out that you're a psychology graduate, and, psychology kind of, goes a lot into this of, especially with social media, what is it called? What's that word? Echo chambers, right? You tend to get stuck in your own echo chambers, and, you develop all of these, are they called cognitive biases?
Yeah, it's when you interpret certain things based on your worldview and your experiences.
Yeah. When it comes to why, I think there are a lot of different factors here in Indonesia. If we're just going to talk specifically about Indonesia, right? There are a lot of factors as to why critical thinking skills in this country are not the greatest. And again, disclaimer, that's not to say that we're the worst when it comes to critical thinking. We're the only one. No, we both lived in America. We know, them Americans can be stupid as well. But I think but do you think it's fair to say that Indonesia is one of those societies that is especially bad at it? And that, of course, with these types of conversations, there's always a multitude of factors. It's not just one.
Yeah.
Right? But you would say, we're particularly worse than average.
Unfortunately, it's a fact, because it's even been shown through studies that Indonesians have Indonesia, our country, we have some of the people with the lowest IQs in Asia.
What was our average again? Wasn't it 80 something?
Yeah, it was in the 80s.
That's insane.
We're not the lowest in rank, but we're down there somewhere.
Do you remember who's the lowest and what was the number?
No, I don't remember.
But 80.
I think the lowest was 70 something, high 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was in Indonesia.
Yeah, but still, I think it's a common knowledge that we're not particularly great when it comes to one particular skill that is super important to get through life, which is critical thinking. And one factor I was exploring was, to crassly put it, is it that we're too poor to be able to critically think? like to what extent is people like you and me, we have the ability to critically think. And and I was doing a bit of research about this, and you know, I think it is fair to say people like you and me, we have the room, we have the mental space to be able to critically think, because we're not so busy worrying about all the other things,
Or
like
basic necessities.
basic necessities, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, very bottom.
You know, I don't think it's fair to attribute our lack of critical thinking solely to our economic condition.
Not attribute that to solely that, but is like how that is a factor.
Yeah.
That is a factor.
It is definitely a factor, but I think what exacerbates that in our country is that we're an archipelago. Not only are we poor, we're also separated by bodies of water. And that makes it much more difficult to distribute resources and distribute information, distribute everything so that everybody can at least have access to the necessary things in order to allow them to realize their potential.
If I were to ask you, what do you, in your opinion, in your educated opinion, is probably the biggest factor, not the only factor, but the biggest factor, what would you say it is? Say it with your chest. No, we're in this together. We are in this. We're in this together. Say it with your chest, and I'll say it with mine.
Oh wow.
What is it about us that makes it so much worse here? While I eat my chicken.
Poor educators.
As in, the quality of our educators is poor, or that they're poor?
No, the
financially?
quality of our
Okay.
educators.
All right.
The quality of our educators. You can't pinpoint it to one thing without sounding like a villain. Okay, let me tell you this. Okay, I have an answer, but I can't give you like a one-word answer. But I'll
ahead.
try make it like 2-3 sentences.
Go ahead.
I don't. Maybe I'll try. Basically, this, because a lot of Indonesians are poor. In order to survive and latch onto life, they hold on to
A crutch.
they hold on to a crutch to allow the hardships of the world to become bearable. And that crutch often, not always, often is, a certain belief system. And I'm not saying it's this religion or that religion. No, it's not about the religion. Not at all. It's not about what religion it is.
Yeah.
It's about holding on to a certain belief, full stop, that makes them, in the end, not actually think about any worldly things, any worldly factors that can help them self-actualize. Just latch onto that one belief. And so their whole lives are just dedicated to fulfilling what that belief tells them to. And again, it's not about the belief. It's not about this religion or that religion, but sometimes even those who guide them in that religion
I agree.
don't know what they're talking about. So in the end,
absolutely.
those religious leaders, those religious leaders end up, I feel, spreading false information,
Yup.
spreading
Bigotry.
spreading false ideals to make themselves feel empowered and also to put themselves in power. So in the end, these poor people are subjugated to individuals who are actually in and of themselves very selfish and only care about themselves, but use God to validate everything that they're saying and everything that they're doing.
Right.
And that's the scary part.
Yep.
I'm sure you know Kania Chita. Kania Chita and I love having these conversations. And something that I didn't realize until she brought it up to me was the lack of scientific thinking in this country. In school, I would assume, we went to the same school. It's very normal for our teachers to really hammer this, drill this in our heads, like scientific thinking, meaning if you don't know something, ask a question, form a hypothesis, research, gather your findings. If you realize that your findings aren't valid, research again, gather more information, and like once you're able to validate your findings, then you can come to a conclusion. And this is something that we do on a daily basis that is so automatic to us that we don't even call it scientific thinking anymore. We're just like, this is how you think.
This is school. This is how we pass.
This is just this is how you think. Like, and we use this in our everyday lives. Let's say I'm like, I don't know you. I don't know Indah G. And I'm like,
who's this bitch?
And then I see a video of Indah G. I'm like, oh, she seems like a chatty person. Let's say that was my assumption. Okay. So my question is, who is Indah G? And then my hypothesis is, I think she's a chatty person because she loves to talk on her podcasts. And then I do my research. Maybe I talk to the people I read stuff about you. Maybe I even like talk to you directly and figure things out about you. And then I retrieve my findings, I gather my findings, and I come to my conclusion. Oh yes, she does like to express herself because she is an individual full of opinions. And I don't when I think about who is Indah G, I don't go through that process and say, have I done this? Have I formed my hypothesis? But that just naturally happens.
Yeah.
That does not naturally happen here. And Kania even argued that doctors in this country, people in positions of power, even though they're basically, individuals that really matter in society, they heal people, they guide people, they protect people, even they lack scientific thinking.
Yeah.
You know, which is crazy. Like, 'cause how did you pass school? Memorization.
Yep. Yeah, I hear that a lot about the Indonesian education system.
Yeah.
And how... And speaking about the Indonesian education system, I also have to say this, like what you were going on about, something that they drilled us back when we were in school.
Which was annoying, but now I get why.
But besides that,
you
know what's the one thing, the one phrase at the start of every class, at the start of every new semester, every teacher always repeats it, and like we've been hearing it all throughout high school and even during college, that one phrase, there's no such thing as a stupid question. And oh my gosh, no, stop. I have so much to say about how dangerous it is that Indonesian society
are scared
seems
to ask.
Not even just scared to ask. You get penalized for asking. Did you see? I'll try to find it and I'll try to put it up on the screen.
Not only that, they don't only get penalized, but they get pissed when you ask. Especially those in positions of power, whether it's a teacher or whether it's an authority figure, they get pissed. It's like, why are you questioning me? Do you not trust that what I'm saying is true? It's not about not trusting, but I think curiosity is very important.
Right. But I think specifically with the younger generation, like what we are seeing is that there is this sort of social stigma attached to it, where it's like, if you are that kid in class, and this is an actual video, I might put it up on screen if I find it. If you are a kid in class and you are actively participating in class, there is a presentation, you are raising up your hand, you are asking questions, right? You will get bullied. You will be that kid that none of the kids want to sit with you during lunch hour.
They're just intimidated, and that's why we need to teach, kids to be sure of themselves at a young age. That starts at home, obviously, but I think these values also need to start being taught at school. Like, don't be intimidated by the smart kid.
Right.
Like, that should push you to try harder. But then again, like, I think human beings are just innately bullies.
That is very true.
It takes a lot of emotional intelligence to be able to overcome that and like bring your ego down and realize that sometimes there are just people who are better than you in various things, and you just have to accept your weaknesses and like hone in on your strengths.
But also, girl, if I'm asking questions, like, you don't gotta trip over it. Like, I'm not asking questions because like I'm doubting your intelligence or like I'm doubting your credibility or whatnot. Like, sometimes you're just asking questions because you're asking questions. We are part of the struggle with encouraging the Indonesian population to critically think. Something that you need in order to be able to critically think is a safe space to even ask questions without it being blown up into this thing of like, then suddenly orang memfitnah, orang suuzon.
And even blurting out quote unquote stupid answers. You need to be given the safe space to like state and voice your opinions, because that's the only way you can learn, right?
Yeah.
Like, fun fact, or maybe it's not a surprise, like in high school, especially in college, I was always sitting in the first row. Like, I wanted to be seen by my professor. I'm like, hey, and like at one point she's just like, okay, not you, somebody else.
Right. Yeah. I was also
like,
that kid.
I think it's so important to be given the opportunity to ask questions. But not only that, in the evaluation system, I am totally against multiple choice questions. I think that is so bad for you.
Why?
Because that's part of memorization. And like, of course, learning some facts is important. But what I really valued is, I'm sure you probably experienced the same thing. When I did IB biology.
Were you SL or HL?
SL.
Me too.
Oh, really?
I did so bad. Tank my GPA, but go on.
But my point is, even in bio, supposedly biology is a science. And like, you supposedly just need to memorize certain processes, certain terms, and understand the definitions. But no, in IB bio, I remember having to define words, having to explain why certain things occurred. And of course, in bio, there's less room to make things up. But my point is, they still expected us to explain the process. So it's not just like listing things out or memorizing things. And that's important, you know, being able to convey your opinions so that it also forces you to figure out why certain things occur. Even if it's wrong, it's still good to be able to form your own opinions.
Right. And I'm sure either you figured this out for yourself or maybe somebody told you, but I recently learned from a friend that actually what you were mentioning about how Indonesian, the education culture here in Indonesia is to memorize. Like there is a very strict emphasis on memorization, and Indonesians are very good at memorizing shit. Oh, y'all are so good at memorizing shit. And then like my friend told me, it's because of the religious education that is often incorporated, not all the time, but often incorporated into most Indonesian education systems, where especially like when you think of Islam, right? Memorizing Quranic verses. I think I could be so wrong, but my friend did tell me this, and she's Muslim. So she was saying how like in a lot of Indonesian, especially public schools, and then they teach religion classes, right? If you're Muslim, they teach you you have to memorize these Quranic verses like word by word, and that's why Indonesians are very good when it comes to memorizing. And they're very God, this is gonna sound so fucking bitchy. They're very good at being told what to do, but they can't figure out how to do shit for their own selves.
Yeah.
Right, and which
is dangerous. And I don't only attribute that to colonization, because even before colonizers came and Indonesia had, you know, various different kingdoms throughout the archipelago, it was still a king, you know, telling his people what to do. You know, Indonesians, at least the society, they're always ruled by someone, even when that someone was, you know, their own people.
Yes.
But wait, can I say something? I hope I can find this study, but I was, again, discussing this with Kania. There's a study. That's okay, release that gas, girl. There is a correlational study. Do you need a burp again?
No, we're good. I like to get that in for like comedic purposes. Okay. Continue.
There is a correlational study that has shown that memorizing, not understanding, memorizing a language that you don't understand decreases IQ. Which is scary. And I'm not saying don't memorize the Quran, guys. For those of you who are Muslim, if you want to learn about Islam, please, by all means. But my suggestion is, if there is no Indonesian translation, learn Arabic. That's amazing. Learning a new language. Learn Arabic. It's such a hard language, but super cool.
Habibi.
Yeah. Learn Arabic and then memorize the Quran in Arabic after you understand or after you've learned the language. Because that way you can also understand the Holy Scripture in its original form.
What it's intended to say.
Yes, and that will prevent you from being misled by certain religious leaders who want you to believe what they believe, which may not necessarily be true, but they know because people don't understand, they say what they want.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, like, this is so interesting. And, you know, I think something that I was very blessed to have was growing up, I learned about all of the main religions. You know, I guess in Indonesia, that's Islam, Christianity, Protestantism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Confucianism. But the cool approach that I took, well, thanks to my university, was that I didn't just read these holy scriptures from a religious standpoint, from a theological standpoint. Like I had to learn it from a literary standpoint, a philosophical standpoint, and I had to read all these holy scriptures from these different religions. So in the end, you know, I was able to compare them, look at their differences, look at their similarities, and therefore, you know, I respect all these religious beliefs because I'm able to see the good in each and every one of them. The problem in Indonesia is sometimes people lean more towards one or the other, and, you know, this unknown causes them to resent one another because they feel like this difference is bad. I am me, they're them, it's us versus them, me versus you. And that's what's causing the polarity to increase, to worsen in this country.
Yeah.
You know? So, you know, my mom told me back in the 60s and 70s when she was growing up, she was still learning about all of these religions in school. Whereas now there are some schools that only teach a specific religion, which I think is so bad. If, you know, if religion is a very important pillar in this country, I respect that. But at least really teach everyone, every single one of them, regardless of their religious beliefs. That is so important.
Right. One thing that really quickly I want to mention, have you ever heard of this study? I can't remember it exactly, but I know exactly what it is. I will put it up on the screen. Have you ever heard of this one study where they found that there is an inverse correlation between intelligence and religiosity? That is an actual research finding. There's an inverse correlation, meaning that the more religious you are, the more likely lower you are in terms of intelligence. And that's why I wonder a lot about, I was talking about this with one of the girls on my team earlier today of like, I can't think, I'm just gonna, look, I'm probably gonna piss some people off.
Yeah.
I mean, shit, not gonna be the first time. I can't think of any society today on earth that is both very high in religiosity, like the majority of the population would identify themselves as being religious, or I mean at least spiritual.
Yeah.
That and have a very good education system defined by how they treat their general population, how to critically think and how to analyze. Intelligence, like an intelligent general population. I can't think of a single society. The closest I can think of, I will be fair, is Singapore. That being said, I think the caveat with Singapore is that they're authoritarian.
Well, I want to be the devil's advocate here and say that
Please
you
do.
did mention that it's a correlational study, which means there are several confounding variables that weren't accounted for.
Yes.
And so when you say there's an inverse correlation between religiosity and intellectual capacity, I don't doubt that. But I think there are a lot of confounding variables that we're not taking into account here, like poverty. The way a country is structured, like in the case of Indonesia, an archipelago.
Corruption.
Oppression. Yeah, like, you know, whether it's a patriarchy, whether it's fair. You said corruption, yes.
Right.
So there's so many different factors. And wait, I was going to say something else. The reason why I can't 100% fully agree with that correlational study is because there are some scholars, like, for example, Islamic scholars that believe in Sufism. You know, they're known to be very philosophical.
Okay.
You know, so yes, there are many Islamic pillars that they abide by, but their beliefs is very much centered around knowledge and scientific thinking.
Yes.
And so I feel like there is room to have faith in God and have faith in a certain religion and still be an intellectual.
And this is where critical thinking comes in. Notice how I said correlation, not causation.
Yeah, exactly.
And a lot of people tend to conflate that.
Exactly. And that's why I said correlational, right? I even re-emphasize that because you say it's correlational, we're not accounting for various confounding variables. If you said it's a causal study, I'd be like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, no. Yeah, but it correlation does not equate causation. But that is, make of that what you want, but that is an existing research finding out there that I have attached over here.
And I want to add one more thing.
Go ahead.
In countries where religion might not be prioritized, I think they've done a very good job of separating religion from state, you know, religion and politics. So I think what's lacking in countries like Indonesia is that they mix the two and combine it and put it together. And that's where they have gone wrong. I feel like how a country is led should not be intertwined with its religious beliefs.
On this topic, did you hear the news today about the apa sih, what's that soccer team? PSSI. Did you hear the news?
No, what happened?
Oh, they're in a lot of drama. Cause I don't know if you keep up with soccer, but they post this one. I think was it like a team photo, right? They posted the team photo of like PSSI, and in this one photo, it featured two of the players wearing the cross
Cross?
necklace, yeah, and that completely just blew up.
People
all over
got
the
upset?
internet. Do you want to read the comments?
I'd rather not because I'd just get so angry.
Okay, well, I'll put it up on screen because I have them. Because my team like screenshotted it and like
Yeah.
sent it to me, and I was like, "What the fuck?" A lot of the comments were basically. A lot of the comments, I think a lot of people can't tell the difference between us in factuality being a Muslim majority country
Yeah,
versus
a
us being a
Muslim
Muslim country. We are not at all a Muslim country. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
gotta touch up.
Yeah, but
Okay.
it's crazy, and I think these are some of the ways, critical thinking, like when we talk about critical thinking, like it's applicable in literally every area of life. And this is one of them, right? Like a part of you being so easily terpancing bigotry, right? Polarization, like what's the word? Not anonymity. Like to antagonize.
Oh,
like to antagonize other people. That also stems a lot from lack of critical thinking skills, and also just y'all forget that this is a country built on like the principles of Bhinneka Tunggal Ika.
Yeah,
And, like,
exactly.
So it's not just for
It's not just for the
Muslim
majority.
population. Yeah, but
Can I say something? This is why, it's so funny for me when we think about our leaders, and I'm not saying any names, or when I say leaders, I don't mean president. Yeah, I mean just like everybody in the cabinet, in the government.
incumbents.
We assume that they all are capable of critical thinking, right? But I think there is a huge problem when we're constantly encouraging people to practice tolerancy. I have a huge problem with the word tolerance because tolerancy or tolerance implies that you're tolerating the other party, meaning like you're accepting the other party, but like basically you're against what the other party believes or what they're doing, but you're like trying to mind your own business. That's not what we want in a country that's founded upon the principles of Bhinneka Tunggal Ika. What we want is respect towards one another. Jadi harusnya namanya diganti, bukan toleransi beragama. It should be, what's respect in Indonesian, guys? I'm suddenly forgetting the word.
Hormat.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Respect.
Yeah, menghormati. Yeah, it should be.
Menghargai,
Yeah.
menghormati.
It should be not toleransi beragama, tapi menghargai, menghormati agama. Why? Why menghormati? Why respect instead of toleransi? Because when you respect, it's implied that, first of all, you try to understand what the other party or the other community or the other demographic is about. Once you try to understand them, you respect them because you understand why they do the way why they do what they do. But then you also, stay true to who you are, and you allow them to do what they want to do, and you do what you want to do. But you respect one another without any hostility, without any resentment towards one another. Because I could tolerate you, but it doesn't mean I like you. I could tolerate you, but it doesn't mean I respect you. So tolerancy for me is such a problematic word, and this is exactly an example of the PSSE thing you just mentioned of tolerancy, because we're like, we're okay with that those dudes are Christian or Catholic or whatever, but like that's not tolerancy. They're not respecting one another.
Right.
So it should be like saling menghargai. It's not about tolerance anymore. It's also about respect, and that's why critical thinking here is so important and lacking, because I feel like the youth are no longer getting the education necessary to understand all different beliefs.
The point that I want to make is that I respect the fact that we are a country that prioritizes and very much venerates religion. I respect that. I accept that. At the same time, I cannot deny that it is very problematic when our people are constantly taught to approach everything first from like an angle of religion, like to view everything through like, what does my religion say about this? What would God say about this?
I agree.
And to view, especially in a country, bring it back to Indonesia, right? We are a country built on Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, unity in diversity, which not only includes ethnic and racial diversity, but also religious diversity. Now, do you not see that there is an issue when we are a country that is built on religious diversity, and at the same time we are we are taught to first and foremost view ourselves and identify ourselves through like what religion we are associated with, like to first identify as a Muslim, to first identify as a Christian or as a Buddhist. And do you not see how
I know I definitely have a problem with that.
Right.
Which is why, you know, even though people who watch this know what religion I am, I still feel very uncomfortable when they're like, apa agama kamu? Because for me, that's something so personal.
I'm sorry I asked it earlier today then.
It's okay. You live in Indonesia, so I'm like, it's okay. I guess there is something Indonesian about Indah.
Yeah, no, because actually, you know what? Something really, sorry to cut you off, but really funny is that for how controversial and how sensitive religion is here, of an issue in Indonesia, at the same time, like part of the interaction when you first get to know somebody and like you're trying to get to know them, like they always ask you, what's your religion?
Really? I never asked that.
Because, no, you know what? No. If we put that back in the States,
Yeah.
you're asking to get hit. You're asking for trouble, right?
Yeah,
Because that's
yeah.
not, like, I think in Western societies, Mela, is Europe like that? You don't ever
Yeah,
ask
of course.
people.
No. In Germany, we don't ask people what religion they are.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that's something like in the Western world that like you just never touch. But here it's like, oh, what's your religion? As if like it's, you know, like where do you live?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, back to what I was saying at the very beginning, how can we open people's mind without threatening, open people's minds without threatening their worldview? Because, hi.
That's Tito.
Yeah. There's no denying that Indonesia now has become a very religious country, right? And we can't suddenly tell people, hey guys, you can't be religious. Like, who are we to say that? You know, at the end of the world, when the apocalypse comes, who knows? Maybe you and I are in the complete wrong here. We don't know, right? But my point is, this is why it's so important to create a space, to create a strong foundational education that gives room for the next generation to be able to think scientifically.
Yes.
Because, you know, their parents at home or their communities might teach them religion A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But with the right mental framework, with the capacity to discern false from fiction, with the capacity to think for themselves, hopefully, they can truly understand like how to live their lives to the fullest, become successful people, become moral people, and at the same time respect, not tolerate, respect those around them, whatever worldviews they may possess.
What about a factor when it comes to critical thinking skills that we haven't explored and I want to explore? Collectivism versus individualism. And I love the topic of individualism versus collectivism.
Yeah, me too. It's a very psych thing.
Is it? Oh yeah, it is a part of psych as well.
Yeah, it's a part of psych.
Yeah, but it's very much like sociology, and sociology is my shit. So
I took a sociology class in college, and specifically to do with the city Paris.
Oh,
it was an elective, so I graduated college in 3 years, right? And I could have graduated in 2.5 years because I got all my credits for both majors.
Right.
But the
you
reason I had
transferred
to,
a lot of IB credits, huh?
Yeah.
Damn. Okay.
But I had to stay an extra semester, meaning instead of completing it in 2.5 years, I completed college in 3 years because I didn't have enough credits, meaning I completed all my credits for my majors, but not enough to graduate. It was like 100-something credits at Columbia, I forget. But for fun, I took sociology, Paris, for the city of Paris. I took a pre-med class. I took American history, and I took a philosophy class. So like in my last semester, none of the classes had anything to do with my major because I was just like picking random classes so that I could graduate.
Yeah, but I think all of those classes that you took like ended up feeding very well into like your career you're doing now anyway. So I mean,
yeah, absolutely, and it gave me a bigger worldview, and it's allowed me to have these conversations because you know I think what's also lacking in this country, which adds to critical thinking, is people are unable to look at things from different schools of thought. You know,
I agree. Actually,
Whereas for me, like you know, when we're having a conversation, I could. Not always, but most of the time, I could look at things from an anthropological standpoint, from a sociological standpoint, from a psychological standpoint, from a scientific, from a let's say biological standpoint. Like because I have knowledge from different schools of thought, it allows me to also have a more Interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Trilingual problems. You know, I'm realizing now that I'm speaking a lot of Indonesian in my daily life. I'm like, wait, oh my God.
Are you gonna
this
forget
is
your?
No, I'm never. Because it's at the end of the day, it's my first language. You know, we did
Yeah.
mention earlier that my German was better than my English at one point, but my first language is English.
Yeah.
So I'll never forget it.
Yeah.
But, you know, there are studies showing that sometimes when you're trilingual, bilingual, you start mixing up things in your head just because your brain's overloaded. But sorry, we went off on a tangent. We were talking about something super important. Individualism and collectivism.
Yeah. And the question being, is part of why Indonesia is one of those cultures that struggles a lot with critical thinking is because we are perhaps oriented too high up on collectivism?
No, I do not think that, because look at Japan. Look at China. Look at, you know, obviously being Indonesian, I want to say that Indonesia is the best country in Southeast Asia, but with that being said, I have to be objective. And in the last 2 years, I've traveled to Thailand a lot for work. And Thailand is a Southeast Asian country like Indonesia, similar climate. Yeah, similar climate, similar living conditions, But they're collectivistic, yet able to practice discipline.
Yes.
And I've really seen a tremendous improvement in the way they've run things in the last 10 years. So if Thailand's capable of doing that, what's stopping Indonesia?
I like what you mentioned just now. Actually, this is like a fresh thought of mine. Discipline. You said discipline.
Yeah.
And actually, when it comes to critical thinking skills, first of all, critical thinking skills are not something that you're born with, guys. Like, it's something that you hone, right? It's something that you consciously practice constantly every day. And here's where discipline comes in. You have to want to practice it every day.
Yeah.
You will have to want to exercise it every day.
Or at least whatever educational institution you attend needs to drill it into you. Sometimes that works too.
Sometimes that works too.
Yeah.
I think ideally, like, it would come from, like, it would be like an internal motivation.
Yeah,
but yes,
yeah.
I agree. No, but I agree.
Yeah.
But back again to, like, you know, the examples that you gave, like Japan, Korea, and yes, very much collectivistic. China, very much collectivistic. I'm wondering, this is not and I have like zero data to I do not know what the data says. This is a genuine question.
Yeah.
I wonder. I wonder where Indonesia is on the scale of collectivism compared to Tiger Asian nations, to the Tiger nations.
I don't think we're less collectivistic or more collectivistic than they are. I really don't think so. But again, there are too many confounding variables that attribute to why these nations are the way they are. Maybe, first of all, Japan, China, Korea, they have 4 seasons. Maybe going through the brutality of winter days have pushed them to become harder working. Maybe.
Right.
Maybe. You know, again, there's no one answer. Even though I do know that they also hold certain religious beliefs, perhaps those religious beliefs, like in Thailand, Buddhism.
Yeah.
You know, Buddhism is very much rooted upon discipline, you
Yep.
know,
Yep.
and a sense of appreciation. And maybe that has contributed to people's innate character as
Right.
well, you know? So again, like, this is a very sensitive conversation, but
I think we're approaching it well, though.
yeah, I mean... it's the character of our people that we need to
100%
develop and change.
Yeah.
There needs to be a major paradigm shift because we are lazy. Not just lazy physically, lazy in the way we don't want to think. We don't want anything to require effort. We want things to be easy.
Culture of convenience.
Yeah, but it's not just Indonesia, okay? Well, you guys watching this who may suddenly feel sensitive, we see this a lot in other countries that are by the equator. Look at the islands, the Solomon Islands, you know, Papua New Guinea, African nations by the equator, like even Latin America, South American countries by the equator.
Yeah.
You tend to see common traits in people. You know, more laid back approach to life.
There's a phrase for it, island time.
Yeah.
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 There's an actual, like, I know with people in Hawaii, there's like 2 modes of time. There's like Hawaiian time, and then there's I might be butchering the pronunciation. I think it's Haole time. And so it's like, if it's Hawaiian time, like if I say like I'm meeting you, if we're in Hawaii and I'm saying like I'm meeting you 2 p.m. Hawaiian time, then you better show up at 2 p.m. when it's in Hawaii. Haole time, again, I might be butchering it, but haole time is like what we do here in Indonesia, jam karet, where it's like, okay, 2 p.m. haole time, it's like, ya kurang lebih jam 2 lah, tapi ya santai.
What do you like?
Me?
Yeah. Are you punctual?
50-50. I think with me, I try to be punctual, and then some days it's a bit harder, depending on like various factors.
So professional things, I'm guessing you're punctual, and like for something that's
yes.
lax, then
yes.
Okay.
If it's professional, definitely. I showed up at this place today, like in our filming location. We're at the Hilton. I showed up at 3 p.m. girl.
Okay.
I showed up at 3 p.m. because I wanted to be early, set up everything, all that type of shit, right?
Yeah.
Also like new equipment and all.
Yeah.
But if it's like personal, if it's personal, I think like I can. I also don't want to be too serious with myself. Like that's something that I've been working on. It's like I don't want to take myself too seriously.
Right.
I see that smile of yours kind of going like, yeah, that's relatable. Of like, but yeah, like at least with me personally, if like I try not to take myself too seriously. And I guess that is one thing that I kind of appreciate moving back to Indonesia, of like that bit of like that laxness. But I also agree that sometimes it's a little bit too lax. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
I mean, being punctual and being disciplined. Punctuality is part of discipline. Being disciplined is very important, but punctuality is not the only thing that allows us to thrive.
of course.
I don't know. I mean, this is tough because if we're only talking about collectivism, I don't think that's the reason why Indonesia's falling behind in critical thinking.
But in my opinion, I think that is not the only factor. Again, I'm not saying anything is like the only like sole like factor. That's obviously impossible. There's always an amalgam of different factors. Everything
Sorry,
okay?
what's wrong?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Dessert.
Double tree chikini, guys. It's yummy.
Di Ponegoro na Cikini. Sama aja kali. Nearby. But right, in my opinion, and again, I'm emphasizing that I'm not saying that this is like the only sole contributing factor. Obviously, that is not the case. In my opinion, I think there is something there about how Indonesian culture, part of why we struggle with critical thinking is because we are hyper collectivistic. Like there's nothing wrong with being collectivistic. There is nothing wrong. I think when you're a little bit too collectivistic. Now, what do I mean by that? Right? Metrics to gauge collectivism. At least like what we see here, like in Indonesia, caring too much about what other people might think of you, because part of it is like disrupting like the social harmony, right? And like feeling that you have to be responsible for how other people feel when you say something or you do something. What were you gonna say?
If you want to operationalize the definitions like that and say that hyper collectivism means that because you're really taking into account how other people feel, like you become mindful and you keep things to yourself. I saw in the study you accumulated in China, sometimes they may not speak up in class, but they're still heavily listening to the point where they're still sharpening their critical thinking skills, because even though they might not express themselves, they're really observing what's happening around them. So why can't the same be done in Indonesia if hyper collectivism is our issue?
And you know what? I found this really interesting study. I'm going to put it up here. It's a study on agricultural students in the U.S. So they were sampling U.S. American students, so obviously like Western oriented, and then Chinese international students, so obviously Eastern oriented. So one is individualistic, the other is collectivistic. And what the study found is that when it comes to the Western students, the more individualistic oriented ones, their critical thinking style is called, what is it called again? It's the engaging style.
Yeah.
Whereas with the Eastern students, those from collectivistic cultures, their critical thinking style is called the engaging and the... Hold on. I got it.
While you look it up, I'm like looking at our dessert. Thank you so much. Apa campur?
Es kelapa campur.
Ooh.
That sounds good.
Now I'm happy that I didn't eat all day. I pig out here. Thank you. Klepon cake. Ooh.
That's cute. Wait, I love klepon. Klepon's my favorite. Do you have a favorite Indonesian dessert?
Martabak.
Manis or
Manis.
telur? Manis.
Manis.
Okay. Mine, like the traditional, like klepon, like the jiggly little like green balls, or actually, yeah, klepon.
Jiggly.
Jiggly. I found it. So with the individualistic students, the Western students, it was the engaging style of critical thinking, and then with the Western students, and then with the Eastern students from collectivistic societies, their critical thinking style is called the information seeking style. So the engaging style is the engaging style
Inviting
is,
everyone into the discourse.
it's
right?
how I'm gonna assume here the engaging style is what you and I are most familiar with doing, right? Of like asking, like directly asking questions, discussion, problem solving, showing confidence and communication with their thought process. Like I'm reading off of like the notes here. Whereas with the information seeking, so those from collectivistic societies, I will say that there is a very controversial opinion out there that some societies are inherently not meant to be good at critical thinking, and I completely disagree, because something from, in my opinion, I think this study sort of like disproves it, of like when it comes to collectivistic societies, yes, they do exercise critical thinking, but in a different way than Western oriented people like you and me, we do it. Information seeking, so what they do is that they gather everything first, right? And they consult, they gather different perspectives. It's still that element of, there's still that element of like maintaining the peace, right? Because you want to consult with like all the different people and kind of like get everybody's opinions and like really like have a holistic approach to it. Whereas like I think the Western approach, which is what we're used to, is kind of like jumping into it straight on.
I think you answered your own question then. I don't think a hyper-collectivism is the issue either. It's just like the way you approach the hyper-collectivistic ideals, you know, like in other, I mean, I'm sure in China and Japan, they also don't want to hurt people's feelings, and they also are very scared of what other people might think of them. But like, it doesn't mean they sit idly and don't do anything. They gather information and then they share when they're told to. Whereas in our country, because we're scared of what other people might think and state to express ourselves, we just choose to not think about it. Nggak usah dipikirin. How often have you heard that? Nggak usah dipikirin, nggak usah dipikirin. Udah, daripada stres nggak usah dipikirin. Karena nggak usah dipikirin, akhirnya nggak dipikirin, dan akhirnya
lu nggak pikir. No,
exactly.
But I will say is that specifically here in Indonesia, we don't even exercise information seeking critical thinking.
Yes, and that's the issue. So again, not collectivism, but we're not even taught to approach things in this manner in order to maintain the peace. So it's that the strategy has not been taught. The strategy has not been taught, and it is, in my opinion, non-existent.
That there am I so bold to say that? I mean, no, objectively, no. It's that we're not taught the strategy, and that even doing so to begin with, even learn the strategy, is not incentivized by certain facets of the culture. Yeah, that's what I meant by non-existent. Not that people don't possess it, but it's not taught in the culture. But think about it. Let's talk about hyper individualism. Think about the debate right now in Western countries about not sexual preference, but sexual identity. This could be heated here because sexual identity, so LGBT.
Like what you identify yourself as, LGBTQIA+.
Okay.
Make sure we say the whole thing. But look, for me personally, you can be anything you want. You tell me you're a trans woman, you tell me you're gay, you're lesbian, you're bi, whatever. I respect your life's choices. But if you, let's say, I heard this, so my TikTok's very American. I don't know why, but
mine too.
Yeah, okay. So my TikTok's very American, and I had a trans woman pop up on my feed once and say, my period cramps are valid.
Oh my God, I know who you're talking about. I know who you're talking about.
But my point is, this person probably comes from a very hyper individualistic society, to the point where even though he or she, because she is a trans woman, possesses critical thinking skills, she's used it to validate her opinions that aren't rooted in facts. You know, at the end of the day, if you're a trans woman and you see yourself as a woman, I respect that. I'll call you she, I'll see you as a woman. But if you say that your period cramps are valid and you don't even have ovaries and a uterus, then I can't accept that.
Then you got me fucked up, because how the hell is that fucking possible? No, I agree. Oh man, I wanted to say something just now and it escaped my mind. ADHD. What did I want to say? I wanted to ask. in your opinion, do you think American society today, right now, has become hyper individualistic?
It's become hyper liberal. I feel like Indonesia and America are experiencing the same things, but on the opposite side of the spectrum.
Which is interesting, no? Like, because correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a correlation. Like, it tends to be that individualism is more related to liberalism, whereas collectivism is more related to
Conservatism.
conservatism. Yeah, right. So I guess, yeah.
I think it basically means that there needs to be some sort of structure in society, you know, in order to keep everybody in check. But to what extent is it oppressive, and to what extent is it too liberal?
Yeah, and I think that's like that's like the golden question, right? Of like, how do we gauge that middle? How do we bring everybody? I mean, starting with Indonesia, but I guess like all over the world, this is a global issue. It's not just exclusive to us. How do we bring everybody to the middle? I mean, shit, if like there was a gun pointed at my head and I had to answer like one like thing, like the most effective, education.
Where do you think Singapore lies in within the spectrum?
Oh, they're that's very interesting.
Right?
Yeah. No, because Singapore, I think, is one of those countries where if you
It's
look
strict,
up,
but it's liberal, meaning like people are free to think what they want to think, but it's strict in the sense that there are several rules that you have to abide by, or else you'll get penalized
but that's
or
a
punished.
But that's a facet of their authoritarianism. No, I think that is if you look up Singapore and whether or not they're individualistic or collectivistic, I feel like you either might get mixed answers, or maybe like on the spectrum, like they're probably, or like on the chart, they're probably the closest to like a mix of those two. Actually, maybe we should all become authoritarian. I'm kidding.
But remember, Singapore is a tiny, tiny, tiny island.
That
I
is
think.
true. Yeah.
Is it as big as Jakarta, or the same size, or slightly smaller? Anyway, my point is it's a small island. It's not divided by bodies of water.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to give people equal access to various facilities. So, you know, I think they have a lot of advantages to allow them to implement whatever it is they've implemented throughout history to allow them to become what they are now.
Right.
Because it's so much easier to manage.
Yeah. Their education system is actually like setara. Like they're all getting taught the same thing. They're getting the exact same quality education. Whereas, unfortunately, in Indonesia, big countries like, not even just Indonesia, guys, like America, the United States, like education is not setara over there as well. So.
And I think we're doing a pretty good job relative to other developing countries. I mean, would you call Brazil a developing country? It's definitely not a first world, but
It's developing. It's
second
developing.
world? Okay, my point is, you know, Brazil is one body of land, right? It's not separated by anything, but even they don't have a robust education system.
Right, and this is where critical thinking of like this is where everything changes depending on like which country we're talking about, right? I think like on top of my head, the biggest factor I can think of with Brazil is corruption over there is like fucking insane, right? Like just I almost argue like maybe slightly worse than us, but I mean, but okay, now I want to explore this question. Earlier on, I said that, you know, with critical thinking skills, it's not something that you're born with, it's something that you hone, right?
Although some people, I feel like, have been lucky enough to be born with the genetic lottery. So sometimes, you know, there is something innate that allows them to really flourish into the critical people that they are, you know, because I know of some cases of individuals born in impoverished communities with uneducated parents, but they grew up becoming very intelligent people. Again, I don't know if I'm allowed to name names. I can literally tell you someone who's in this creative space, but what I'm trying to say is, yes, for the most part, critical thinking needs to be taught, but, you know, how do you explain savants that exist out there who may not have the proper nourishment and the proper environment to become successful people, but somehow they've managed to do so? Yes, it's an anomaly, but yeah. What I basically want to say is sometimes you're lucky with the genetic lottery and it's expressed effectively because of the environment. But, you know, if that person, that individual with the great genes isn't educated or disciplined in a way that could help him or her become who or he or she's supposed to be, then that might be tough.
Yeah, no, that is true. I think some personalities and certain, to put it crassly, some people are just built different.
Yeah.
Which one do you think you, by nature, are more towards?
Ooh, that's interesting. You know, I would like to believe that my parents are intelligent people. But with that being said, they come from such a different generation, and I do feel, and this is no disrespect to my parents, but I do feel that they really lack emotional intelligence. My parents.
That is definitely something as a result of, like, it's just something to do with, like, the generation that they're from, for sure. Yeah.
But looking back at my upbringing, I don't necessarily think they were the ones who taught me how to think critically. You know? I have to say, yes, it's definitely the schools I attended, but it's also something in me, which is why I think it's a nurture and nature thing.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, having my parents allowed me to have a good brain. But definitely the schools I attended helped me become the person I am today. So it's both. And also my life experiences.
For
seeing
sure.
other people's stories, witnessing how other people view the world, seeing how other people solve their problems. But again, curiosity. I think you and I, we share curiosity. We're such curious people that we go out there and ask, we observe, we absorb. We try to make sense of it, we internalize, and then we interpret.
Yeah. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like there is something there about how third culture kids like us, and like especially those of us that like have moved around, living in different places and like are exposed to so many different cultures, I feel like that helps.
Yes, traveling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh,
That's
traveling.
so important.
And at the same time, I get it. That's not something that I say out a lot of, like, oh yeah, and like everybody should travel more. Obviously, like not everybody has the money for it. But I mean, when it comes to critical thinking skills being something that you hone, what tips would you give of like how do you exercise like
Critical thinking.
Yeah.
That's so good.
For any of any of the listeners tuning in, maybe they're feel inspired by this conversation and they're like, I want to be a better critical thinker.
Yeah. First of all, don't take things at face value. That's number one, you know?
What does taking
yeah.
things at face value mean?
I'm going to give you a good example. So something that I felt GIS, our school, did so well.
Go Dragons!
Was that every time I had to complete an assignment, especially when it pertained to subjects like history or economics or psychology, when there was a paper to be written, we would not be allowed to only gather information from one source. There was a rule, I remember, in high school.
Yes.
It was like you have to have, let's say, 2 websites, 1 encyclopedia, 1 newspaper article, 1 magazine article. Basically, you need to have a variety of sources, and you need to prove that in your citations page. And that, although it felt so tedious at the time, now as an adult made me realize this is why I really look at things from different sources, because sometimes certain sources are commissioned by a certain party, so it's biased. And you see these biases, you know, because you're looking for the same information in all these different sources, but then you see that there are biases, and then you find the common thread. What is the fact, actually? What are the commonalities between all these articles, between all these sources? And that's when you can really, to the best of your abilities, deduce the facts and realize what it is that's really objective and worth writing about, you know? And to this day, even you guys might think, like, how does it help your career now? I write a lot. For my work, I write a lot. The questions I write in Bicara Cinta for Puella, I write myself. A lot of the scripts that I write myself. A lot of the speech, well, not a lot, all the speeches I make, wherever it is, I write myself. And, you know, when I'm looking for sources to back what I'm saying, I don't just look at one source. I look at a variety of sources. So then I see the biases. I see the polarity in the way people think. I see, you know, I just I just see all the gunk that's out there.
You get perspective.
I get perspective.
Right.
You helped me find the right word. You know.
And you know what's so funny? Because you were mentioning how you write. Because that is the tip that I have written down here. And it's actually a tip not from me, but from Jordan Peterson. I'm sure most people are familiar with that name.
Learn how to write.
Learn how to write. And how do you be a better writer?
Read.
Yes.
Yes. You know, in college, we all had to take a class called university writing. And the very first class I had to attend, the first day of college, what was that class? University writing. And I was like, oh, no, I hate this.
Yeah, I had an equivalent of that, yeah.
But something that really opened my mind and opened my eyes was that basically we were taught how to do things efficiently. So we would be given pages and pages of journal articles, which were very boring, mind you. But then we were taught to annotate. So read and annotate. And those annotations were supposed to help remind us and guide us in our writing. And without us realizing, it also, again, taught us how to write and think in a structured manner, and that helped, you know.
Right.
And so, sorry, I do want to answer your question. How can I become a better critical thinker? Be curious. Don't take things at face value, and really take the initiative when you are trying to understand something to look at it from different perspectives, from different sources, because it's so important for you to not fall into dangerous biases.
I want to add on to your list. Part of it is, would you argue due diligence also belongs on that list? You have to do your due diligence.
Of course. It's not something that you can do once or twice and then get over with. It's something you do throughout your life. I mean, I've been out of school for like almost a decade now, and
like high school or
high school.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I've been out of school for a while now, and these things I still use in my everyday life. Even when I'm looking up facts about a celebrity, like let's say, like J-Lo recently just came out with a movie that's highly controversial in the US. We might not have heard of it in Indonesia, but they're like saying, oh, she's a fraud, she doesn't sing her own song, she's not talented.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hold up. Like my algorithm's picking up on this negativity, but let me look it up and see, things for myself. Right?
Oh my God, I cannot stress enough to you guys, like, especially on social media, like y'all be hearing shit about this certain public figure or that celebrity. Like, don't just go with what other people are saying about a certain somebody, because, and I have been, oh my God, this is where my emotions start pouring out. Like, I have been a victim of that. Don't worry, I won't go into too much details like on this show. On this episode. But y'all know me. Y'all know I have been a very frequent victim of that. Of just like people saying whatever they want about me. One common narrative that I'm a Zionist, and people just roll with it.
Yeah, that's see? The biggest problem with Indonesian netizens, which you've described earlier, is that they take things at face value. So if
don't do their due diligence,
they don't. So if the very first thing I've ever seen about you online is Indah supports war, and I take that at face value, then I'm gonna be like, oh my gosh, she's a horrible person, and that's unfair. And that also shows that you're stupid. You shouldn't do that. You should look it up, and again, as I said, cross-reference. Check different sources, due diligence, and then you'll see the real Indah.
Go on my fucking pages to see that I am not a fucking Zionist, but okay, whatever. No, and actually, another thing that helps with critical thinking, learning a new language. I think you touched upon that a little bit, right? But studies have shown that critical thinking abilities are closely related to language learning strategies. Yeah. Right? And it's so interesting when I was reading up about that, because in here in Indonesia, you and I have definitely like been at the receiving end of this of like so Inggris ngapain ini Indonesia ngapain bahasa Inggris kayak gitu. And so it's like there's this culture as well of not only bullying and sort of like socially ostracizing people for wanting to be better and like maybe be more intellectual or whatnot, participate in class, but it's also this like social ostracization of like speaking a foreign language, especially a language that, okay, let's just be blunt here, English is definitely like a language that is associated with like, it's a language of science, trade, business, like there is this sort of like intellectual connotation attached to it. And because of that, like there is this sort of culture of like, you kind of want to membantah against that, like you kind of want to like rebel against that. And so you put down, like you're putting down people for speaking in English, like wanting to learn English, and malahan, learning a new language helps with critical thinking. And also I read something about how those of us that are bilingual meaning like you speak 2 languages or more, those of us that speak multiple languages, like because we speak multiple languages, it also helps us to like have different perspectives as well.
And sometimes you take on different personalities depending on the language you're speaking, right? I'd like to say that I definitely agree that learning a new language helps you gain perspective. Even it might even help you think more critically, but it's not definitive. I'm going to use Thailand as an example again. I think Indonesia does a much better job in educating its people in the English language than Thailand does. Sometimes in Thailand you struggle to communicate with the locals because a lot of them don't speak English as well as people here actually.
Yeah,
you know,
they're on the English whatever something index, I'll put it up, like there's a chart, actually Thailand is way below Indonesia. Indonesia, like we actually, like our English is not great, but like
it's better.
It's okay.
Yeah. When you see like these funny vlogs online of expats coming to Indonesia, they can communicate with the locals better than they do in like Vietnam or Thailand.
Yeah.
But with that being said, IQs in the country that I just mentioned is actually higher than Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand. And Vietnam's doing a very good job of advancing, by the way, technologically. They have Vin Tech, if I'm not mistaken, their first electric car.
Yeah.
But my point is, the language could be a factor, but if you're looking at Thailand and Vietnam and seeing how fast they're growing economically, then it's not definitive.
Right. Yeah. For sure.
And one more thing, I think Indonesia is a lot better now about bullying people who speak a foreign language, because it was much worse like during the time when I just started my career.
When you were coming up.
Whereas now, I'm not gonna lie, I see a lot of young Indonesians, kids and teenagers, not being able to speak Indonesian and only speaking English instead. I think that's a phenomenon that's occurring more often in big cities like Jakarta. But I think we should also be careful. I think to young parents out there, millennial parents, it's important for your kids to still be able to speak the language. They don't necessarily have to speak it in a super fluent manner, because I know I don't. But, if your kids are Indonesian or half Indonesian, it's important that they have a good understanding of the language and able to speak it on a daily basis.
Yeah.
You can definitely speak Indonesian. Okay, I remember when you came to Puala, you came to Bicara Cinta, you struggled conveying complex ideas in Indonesian. But like if I were to speak to you about like getting food at a mall and watching a movie, I don't think you'd struggle to explain to me, I want to eat this, let's go watch that. Bahasa gaul, like when you're speaking to Choki, just bahasa gaul, I'm sure like you're not struggling to speak, to convey your everyday ideas.
Bahasa gaul for me is like a completely different language.
Not bahasa gaul, because I don't use gue lo either, but just being able to talk. Stop.
I think it's more so being able to communicate in more colloquial settings where like I'm not required to use more, I guess, higher level vocabulary. I guess is what is what maybe you're referring to, because when it comes to my Bahasa Indonesia, like I'm definitely getting a lot better, guys. But I think it's because, especially like the school that we went to, for me, like growing up, my only exposure to Bahasa Indonesia was through Bahasa Indonesia class.
And also at home with your staff, I'm guessing. I don't think you were speaking English to your staff.
With my staff, like sort of, my domestic workers, my drivers. But then again, I don't really talk to them that much, to be fair. So the bulk of it was like through classroom, and so I think I don't know where you're at, but for me, I'm very good with like formal Bahasa Indonesia, like textbook Indonesian.
Yeah, me too.
And then when it starts to like, when you start using words like what's that word? There's that one, scanna, scanna, or whatever. That's where I'm like a little bit left behind. But Yeah.
No, I'm still trying to. I try to use the word skena just to see whether I'm using it the right way, but I don't think I've mastered it either.
Apa sih cowok skena terus what's the other one?
It's not hipster, is it? Skena's not hipster.
You tell me.
Skena itu anak senja bukan sih?
Oh, bukan. Skena tuh kayak misal ngobrolin musik, nah dia paham banget soal musik gitu.
Okay.
Okay.
Someone who's master.
Kayak kalau suka musik tuh dia punya minimal
Punya benchmark.
Yeah.
Kalau
Okay.
suka rock tuh minimal bandnya apa kalau suka rock gitu.
Yeah, a big part of language is also not just acquiring vocabulary, but also understanding the cultural context in which to like use certain words, and like that's definitely, in my case, very much lacking. But I'm working on it. I'm working on it. Do you read? Are you an avid reader?
People expect me to be an avid reader, but
You don't got the time and energy for it, huh?
no. But what's funny is every year, and it's been happening the last few years, the first month of the year, I always complete like a novel within the first like week or two. And yeah, so like by the time like second week of January rolls around, I've usually already completed a novel. And then I'm like, yeah, but this means I can at least read one novel a month. And then come March, I haven't even finished the second.
were you the one who posted on your Instagram story of you like by some like hotel beach or whatever, and you were reading the 48 Powers
Yeah.
of Law? Was that
Yeah,
you?
yeah.
Did you finish that book?
Nope.
No. Oh my gosh, I'm too scared. No, I haven't either, and I'm too scared to like keep
Yeah,
going
I'm
because
like, I don't think I can live like this.
right, it's like a manual of like how to be a fucking
Psychopath?
Yeah, like how to be a fucking sociopath. Nah, because you got me reminiscing about like one of the things
Yeah.
that I really appreciated about the education that I had growing up, like at our school. Which English did you take for IB?
Higher.
Langlit
A1.
or lit? Langlit or lit? Do you remember?
I think at the time it was just like IB higher English A1. So for first language language speakers, it wasn't like lang or lit.
Interesting. Okay, because by my time it was like either your Langlit or your literatures, and I was in literature. I was in higher level literature, and when you are in literature, and you probably know this because you're in German literature, you gotta read.
Yeah.
You gotta read a lot, and I hated those fucking books. Also,
Yeah.
they made us read Philip Larkin poems, and Philip Larkin is like depressing as shit, and that's how I got depressing.
You know, I think when I did IB higher English, the lang lit and lang, what'd you say?
Langlit and literature
It was one thing.
was one thing combined.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, I used to, obviously I read a lot because I was an English higher student, but also in college, especially when you go to a school like Columbia where you have to take 9 classes from the core curriculum regardless of your major, you read thousands of pages a week. Thousands of pages a week. So, and I'm not the kind of person who like skips pages. I'm very by the book. I'm very by the book.
I can see that about you. Yeah.
I'm very by the book, so I'd read every single page. So that was a pain, but in retrospect, I'm so glad that they forced us to read those books because it's made me a much more cultured individual. You know, I'm able to reference so many important people from, you know, in the past, and also understand why certain countries, certain communities have certain thought processes because they all stem from,
Right.
you know, those philosophical thoughts, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I fucking hated the books that we had to read. Like, the bulk of my like assigned reading was like only in high school because by college, like I was a business student. But like,
okay.
God, I fucking hated those books. But man, like looking back, I really appreciated that I developed a habit for like reading, and more importantly, reading the things that I didn't want to read.
Yeah.
There
And also being able to deduce information from what you read. Because when you're trying to read thousands of pages really quickly, sometimes you can't catch, well, you don't really know what you're reading. But like,
Yeah.
you know, you're really taught to focus.
but the part about it gave me like it gave me the habit of pushing myself through reading things that I didn't want to read. And why does that matter in the context of today when it comes to like critical thinking and like digesting like information, whether figuring out whether or not it's true or false, is because I think about it specifically with like news articles. I find it very interesting.
Journal
like
articles, news articles.
Yeah.
They're not the most interesting. but
Especially
it's
news.
good for you.
No,
Yeah.
especially news, because I have experience with this with some of my friends and acquaintances, whereby if I send them an article number one, not only like I've been in situations, I'm not even shitting with you. I'm not even kidding with you. Like I've sent them articles from like, let's say like a specific news company, right? And then they immediately, I forgot what the term is in psychology, but it's like you see that I sent, for example, like a CNN, and then because I sent CNN, like you already have all these assumptions that like, oh my god, like you must be like a fucking far left social justice warrior, fucking feminazi type shit. Not that exaggerated, but it's like I've been in situations where I was sent, especially news articles, and not only is there like so much bias, and I get it, news companies are normally like they're not unbiased. I get that, but at the same time, like I think what came out of my education was also like consulting liberal sources, conservative sources, right?
Because
Like
these news outlets have a stand, you know.
Yeah.
They're like left or right, sometimes in the middle, but
but people don't want to do that. You so much as like send. I know people like they will not read a Fox News article.
really? I mean, I sometimes Fox can bother me a lot, but I still check it out just to see what they're thinking and how what their views on things.
Right, and it bothers me too on like an emotional level. Like I sit there and I'm like, what the fuck is wrong? And like I fucking hate Tucker Carlson.
But CNN's not always flawless either. There's a lot of things wrong with that too. So at the end of the day, you just have to watch everything. I like to watch Al Jazeera. I like to watch BBC. I like to watch Euronews.
Yeah.
So I check out all these news outlets.
Yeah, I mean, shit. I'll even consult sources from the fucking Jerusalem Post. Right?
Yeah.
So I think there's that. Do you think enough of like Indonesians are reading?
You know, I was just at an event at a university today, and a lot of what the educators said was baca ya biar pinter, harus banyak baca, but they don't specify what to read.
Yeah.
It's just like read, and it's kind of scary because I've seen certain public figures with certain beliefs, and I'm not just talking about religious beliefs, just like certain beliefs in life that have distributed books that are very one-sided. You know, created by certain people who want our society to think a certain way, and that's dangerous, you know? And this is why, back to what I was saying, you said give tips on how to think more critically, right? Look at things from different sources. That's key. That's key. That's key. That's the only way you're going to be able to know whether the things you grew up with are biased or not, and whether you've really been taught the right things.
Oh fuck, it's gonna annoy me in post-production that I can't remember where I saw this survey. But I saw a survey on like reading rates, like the rate, how much do Indonesians read a book? And on one survey, like the results were really high, but that's because they took into consideration like holy books like the Quran or like the Bible or like.
Do you think we have to read a book though to become more intelligent, or could we be like avid news readers? Because if that's your question, then yeah, I read a lot every day. I read the news, I read journal articles, I read.
That's a good question.
You know, so I may not necessarily read novels frequently, but I do read. You know? And surprisingly, I like to believe that I'm quite well informed because I keep up with the news, domestic and international, but like, you know, the person I've become today isn't because I've read like Shakespeare all my life, although I have read a lot of Shakespeare, John Locke, Virginia Woolf.
One of my favorite books is from her, but yeah. What's it, Karl Marx?
Yeah, Karl Marx.
Yeah, sorry. This is really good.
Yeah, it is, right?
This is really nice. Wow.
Honestly, I think I've read books created by a lot of great minds of the world throughout history, but it's been a while. But I am trying to reread them though.
That is true though. Like, I guess you don't have to read a book. Like,
Yeah.
not even in print, not even a fucking Kindle. I want a Kindle. You don't have to. Yeah, I
I'm
guess
trying
you
to
don't
look
have
something
read
up
them.
for you. What I'm reading right now, I forget the author's name.
All right.
So I listen to a lot of podcasts as well. One of them being the Wall Street Journal on Spotify. And because of a limited series on the Wall Street Journal about AI, I decided to buy a book that they recommended. And it's called Superintelligence by Nick Bostrom. Superintelligence, Paths, Dangers, and Strategies. I haven't finished the book yet, but like sometimes what I listen to can ignite a sense of curiosity in me that causes me to read, you know? But like also, for those who don't know, and I'm not trying to boast or anything, but sometimes it's a struggle to get enough sleep on a daily basis because there are a lot of things I have to do. And I'm sure we're all very busy people in our own ways, but to have to then pressure myself into reading just to make me feel like I'm worthy or smart enough, it's unhealthy. So I read when I can. And I think that's why I always manage to finish a novel within a week or two in the first month of the year. It's because it's also the chillest time of the year, right? We're all just coming back from Christmas and New Year's break. So I have more time. And then as the year goes along, I get lost.
I guess the focus isn't so much on like reading. I think it's just like the acquisition of information, and more importantly, like what types of information. I guess it's like the way to like encapsulate it. Speaking of podcasts, like one particular podcast that I really would like everybody to listen to is actually from the
Diaries of a
CEO, Steve Bartlett.
Yeah, I listened to him too.
Did
but
you listen?
although recently it's been a lot about like our bodies and diets and how to like stay fit and how to stay sharp, which is great because we need to know these things. I feel like human beings live such unhealthy lifestyles nowadays, but it's been a lot of that recently in the last month or two.
Did you watch the episode with the CIA? Andrew, what's his name?
No.
Bustamante?
No.
I'll put it up here. Listen to this one, and in particular, like listen to what Andrew was saying about perspective and perception, because I think it relates so much to the overall topic today of like critical thinking, and like people really do not understand the difference between perception, perspective. Nobody's going to explain that better than Andrew. So honestly, just go there.
I mean, if you want the quick breakdown, perception is basically the way we view the world through our biased lens, whereas perspective is an accumulation of points of views, essentially, that you gather together and then come to a conclusion about. So it's important, of course, it's important to be able to perceive, because that's how we take in information. But at the end of the day, it's really important for you to look at things through different perspectives, because that's how you can really come closer to the truth.
Yeah. And like the basic stuff too. Like I guess to wrap this, we're coming to a closing here. Let's do basic stuff too. Like you are just a product of your environment. And so one thing that you can do about your environment is that you have to make the willing, conscious decision to want to surround yourself with different people that will offer you those different perspectives.
Oh, and you've just made me realize that I think that's sometimes what's lacking in our country. We want to always be around like-minded people who make us comfortable.
Or people of like the same demographical group as well. People
who validate what we believe and how we view the world. And as much as that might be comforting, and sometimes we need that, it's so important to branch out. And I can give you a very concrete example. Like if I were to hang out with Indah every day, I'd probably be very happy because I have someone who can.
I would hope so.
who can have these conversations that I like to have. But a good example would be me going to Papua 2 weeks ago. I went to not just Jayapura, but also Wamena. It's like a mountainous region in central Papua. And I visited different tribes. And of course, like, I don't think I can say, oh, me and these people and these tribes see the world the same way. But going there and like speaking to them, not having the types of conversations we would have, was really enlightening. It gave me insight as to how they lived, what their worries are, and also made me think to myself, like, how can I come here and add value to their lives without, changing their traditions or destroying their culture, because I don't want to do that. It's what's giving our country diversity, right?
Yeah. Don't be that white person barging in being like, this is how we do it in my...
But it's, I'm people may not know about this, people may not know about this, but I don't mind, sometimes hanging out or even staying in villages, or you might say kampong,
Rural
rural
areas.
areas. People might say, oh, but then you can't stay at a 5-star hotel and have all these services. Fair, of course, I like comfort too, but sometimes staying in these places, okay, one, of course, it humbles you, but two, it gives you insight as to how everyday people live. Because if you want to bring about change,
Yeah.
you can't do that without understanding what you're dealing with. You know, we can't sit here in Jakarta and say, oh, we have the solution to make this country better, and just stay here and assume we know what's going on out there. It doesn't work like that. We need to do the field work.
Yeah.
And like, I would like to believe that that's what my team and I are doing. And I love that, you know?
Yeah.
And also in New York, you know, actually, when I was in college, a lot of people shamed me for not hanging out with enough Indonesians. And in my head, I'm like, I'm not trying to ostracize them, and I'm not trying to avoid them, but like, what's wrong with me coming to New York and befriending people from different nations?
Yep.
You know, and I don't know about you, but like when I was still at GIST was extremely diverse. We had students from like 80 different countries. So like, it's not what it's like now. It was super, super, super multicultural, that whether you liked it or not, you had to befriend different types of people. And like I applied that in New York as well. Like one of my friends, 4 of my best friends in New York, one's half Ethiopian, half American, one was Brazilian, one was Scottish, and one was Chinese American. So like, they're all very different, and I loved my friend group. And it also, again, made me a much more knowledgeable person. So like, it's not that I didn't want to befriend Indonesians, but like, I came to a new country to experience something different. Like, I don't want to just like live in a mini Indonesia.
On the real, no, I wrote an entire chapter about this in my book. Fun fact, I'm an author. But I even wrote a chapter about this in my book, because basically, like, to summarize my book, it's just like a nonfiction memoir of my life growing up as a third culture kid, growing up in the international school system, and then moving to America, coming back here, all that type of stuff. I interviewed over 100 international students from all over the world, including comedian and actor Ronnie Chung, as well as Tammy Duckworth, the U.S. Senator of Illinois.
Okay.
Yeah, super, super cool. But I wrote a chapter in that book of like, oh man, you know how like some international students, like, they go abroad
Just to hang out with the
like,
same people.
with the same people from back home.
Yeah.
And I know so many of those types of like the Indonesian international students. Yeah, I know so many of the Indonesian international students. Like, y'all don't want to hang out with any of the American kids. Y'all don't want to hang out with white kids, black kids, Latino kids, and like, y'all just want to stay in your own group. I even remember there was we had a lot of Indonesian student organizations like throughout Los Angeles, right? Because obviously there's a huge population of us, and like there was this like very controversial discourse because like some of like the Indonesian international students, like, we was like trying to throw a party, and there were a lot of us that wanted to make it sort of like, welcoming to all, so we can bring like our white homies, our black homies, Latino homies, and all that. And then some students, like, they didn't want that. Some students, they were like, no, can we just like make it into like an us thing? And it's like, oh damn, so it's like all these like really uncomfortable, like, ooh, you racist, like
Time to change the light quickly, Klaus. You can continue talking.
Type of discourse. This coconut is good. I want the link to that. This coconut is good.
Okay.
I have my spotlight back. No, and yeah, so then
Discourse. That was the last thing you said.
Yeah, this whole like uncomfortable discourse of like, oh damn, like, okay, some of y'all like racist, like, that's not cool.
And they call us discriminatory for not wanting to hang out with fellow Indonesians, and it's not wanting. It's just wanting to venture out and understand different people.
Yeah, with me, I don't know about you, but with me, like, I left GIST and went to America, like, wanting to temporarily, not forever, but like, I wanted to just temporarily step away from Indonesians and Indonesian culture, just because, like, I want to try something new while I'm here in America.
For me, it was for different reasons, because starting my career at such a young age was a blessing, but also very difficult in many ways.
I'm sure.
And I think I was very traumatized by how I was treated by the media, by the people around me, that like moving to the United States, other than for my education, was also an escape, right? So like wanting to be with different people was also a means for me to heal from whatever I had experienced in the past. But I want to call someone out right now, actually, since we're on this podcast and we're all about being real. there was a newspaper article written about me back then when I was still in university, saying that, oh, Cinta Laura doesn't want to hang out with Indonesians and she doesn't consider herself Indonesian. And I'm like, and this was written by a man who prides himself in being an educator and at the time was probably already in his like late 40s or now probably in his 50s. I'm like, the audacity for you to bully. Well, maybe at the time I wasn't a minor anymore, but I had just turned 18. So like, wow, how petty of you. Shame on you. But anyway, I forgive you. But with that being said,
fuck you.
Yeah. Yeah. But with that being said, it's also a lesson learned because I feel like I had just moved to the United States when that happened, and I was still very traumatized by the things that had happened to me when I was younger, that I was socially awkward. And perhaps I didn't use the right diction to describe like certain things that was going on in my head. And perhaps there may have been a misunderstanding, but whatever, we learn from our past. And I think the fact that you and I decided to come back, to make an impact in our own ways shows how much we love this country. And despite the fact that we use English in our daily lives and we have a certain way of looking at the world, it doesn't diminish our love for this place.
No, and like something I feel very strongly about, part of our international education wasn't just so that we could go outside and like see the world, but to like bring back parts of it to our own world here. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like to bring back a little bit of the outside world of Indonesia. That's something I feel very strongly about. And I hope I'm doing that.
Yeah. I actually have a question for you. Given the way you are, how do you stay sane here? Do you still hang out with the friends that you used to have back in high school? Like, given the way that you are, how eloquent you are, the way you express yourself, how do you feel less lonely?
First of all, it's bold of you to assume that I'm sane. First of all, but no, that's
true.
Are you still tight with like friends from back in high school?
No. I mean, I can imagine a few names, those who had been kind to me back in the day and have remained kind. But there were some bitches too,
Yeah.
It sucks, but like one of them just had her birthday recently and I still remember, just because of how much I remember she hurt me, that I remember her birthday. I wish I could just forget her birthday. But a couple of days ago, I was like, oh, it's this date. I'm not going to say the date in case like somehow she stumbles upon this, but I'm like, oh, it's her birthday.
No, something that you and I share in common in terms of personal experience, and I've actually never put this out there, but like I was also like really badly bullied growing up, like really fucking badly bullied. Like, oh, let us not get into that because I'll start crying. But I was really badly bullied, and for some fucking reason, I remember the birthdays of my bullies. Till this day, I don't know why.
Yeah,
I wish I could. Why do I do that? But no.
I think it's deep inside, although, I mean, I would like to believe that I've forgiven, and this is why I'm able to become the person I am today, because I just don't think about them anymore. But I think at the end of the day, bad experiences, trauma are never forgotten, right? They still linger deep inside you. You just learn to like layer it with beautiful memories or like with more important things. But it's normal that sometimes it would surface and remind you of what had happened in the past.
There's the book, The Body Keeps Score. Very good book.
Yeah.
Y'all should check it out. But
I know it.
I'm very lucky. I'm still very, very close. Like some of my bestest friends today, some of my ride or dies, like, yeah, we're from high school. And even if like, with some of us, like we went our separate ways because of college, and lost touch over like, for a few period of years, but then like we made our way back to each other. Some of us, like some of those relationships were even like kind of unanticipated because back in high school we were like, okay, but we're not like homies, and now we're like homies, you know what I mean? And there's a part of that. Oh, and you know what's so fucking funny? Cause like, back in just like, to be fair, back in just like, that wasn't when I was like really badly bullied, but I will say like, not in high school, but I will say it's so funny how the moment I got even just a little bit of internet clout, and then suddenly like all the people from back in high school, they be hitting me up, they be sliding into my DMs and everything. I'm talking everything from like, hi Indah, do you still remember me? Follow me back, yeah. Hi Indah, hey, could you help like promote my business? To even like, I remember boys back in high school, they wouldn't even so much as look my way, cause bitch, I was ugly. I was ugly. I was not the pretty girl. I wasn't the type of bitch that any any of the boys would look at, and then now I have a glow up, and then suddenly all these boys are in my DMs.
You don't have to feel bad. Nobody asked me to prom in high school, so it made me feel really ugly.
Nah.
So, kids are just mean.
They really are. But how do I stay sane here as best as possible? I really didn't want to come back here in the beginning. I really did not. But one thing, two things. Number one, I mourned a lot moving back here because part of what I was grieving was I thought that moving back here was like the coffin to my career of like I'm never gonna find as much opportunities as I would back in America, and like I couldn't land a job, nobody would hire me, I couldn't like get my fucking visa, and one thing that I'm very grateful to have learned is that when it comes to opportunities, and I understand that there's a level of financial privilege that is required of this, but for those of us that have that financial privilege, opportunity exists everywhere, and if it don't exist, you make it yourself. And I feel like that's what I've done. So that is one. And the other thing that I mourned coming back here is that I think it's the whole like the grass is greener on the other side, and I talk about that a lot. Of like, you know, we had a really good life in America. I had a very good life in America that I did not want to like, you know, exchange to come back to fucking like, ya, deso Indonesia gitu kan. But it's really realizing that the grass that you are standing on right now is no greener than the grass on the other side. The grass on the other side is just a different shade of green.
Yeah.
And that really helped a lot. And moving back here, the first few years, I don't know about you, I was fucking miserable. I was so lonely. I had no friends. I couldn't speak the fucking language just yet. No cultural context. Nobody wanted to be friend with me because like I speak Indonesian like fucking Bu Guru Indonesia, and like but over time you find your people, and I think that's what at the end of the day, like we're humans, and humans are we're creatures of connection.
Yeah.
And finding those connections, like Mela here in the back, always in the back. It makes all the difference to feel like, you know, not only like career-wise is there like a space for me to thrive in, but even just like community, and like there are people here that
Absolutely. That's why I said, you know, during this conversation that there are a lot of bright, amazing people in this country, but you have to look for them, you know, and like how can we make them more prevalent?
Yeah.
in the
You know,
future.
like what you said earlier, what did you say? Silent majority?
Yeah.
Hey,
Yes.
I think it's a silent are we? Silent majority?
To be honest, like you wouldn't be surprised. I mean, you would be surprised as to how many people share the same opinions. They just don't know how to convey it.
Or they keep a hush hush because they know they're gonna get in trouble for it.
Yeah.
Y'all hit me up. I want friends. Yeah, but eventually, like you know, we finally met and everything, and like you know, you are somebody now in my life that obviously, like what you're doing right now.
I'm gonna call you out right now. You just have to be better at responding to texts. Like Indah can take like 3 days to text back, or sometimes you have to be like, "So, are we confirmed?" And then she responds without a hi. Like it's just like a sudden, and I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, I'm working on it. No, I get overwhelmed.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
On WhatsApp,
Yeah.
and then I just like shut off. It's
Yeah,
so bad.
yeah,
and
me
it's
too.
unprofessional.
Actually, no, but okay. When it comes to my professional life, I try to do a very good job of responding. But yeah, in my personal life, I'm exactly like that. And people sometimes take it personally, but that's why I didn't take you personally when like I didn't take it personally when you decided not to respond immediately, because I'm like, you know what? I think she's exactly like me.
Yeah. No, and also because I was waiting for. I had to wait for other people as well.
Yeah.
So there's also that, but
still, yeah, you could say I'm still waiting on this. Anyway, whatever.
That is
We're
true.
here now, and everything's good.
Yeah, no, that is true. But other than that, any like other questions or like last words that you want to say on this topic or any topic, really?
Actually, just want to reiterate what I stated in the beginning of the show. Again, to anybody watching this, it's so easy for us to complain about the things that are happening around us, the inconveniences that we encounter. And of course, to some of you who may have lived abroad or have gone to international schools, sometimes we don't understand why something so mundane or something so easily understood is not understood by many people here are the people around us. But I think, you know, at least for me, when I returned to Indonesia 5 years ago, I was frustrated. I was lonely. I didn't understand why things were the way they were. And some of you guys might think, like, how come you know, you've been in the public eye since you were 12 years old? Yes, but
That's different.
one, I lived abroad, you know, until the age of 11. My dad's a foreigner, so I have that. I lived in the U.S. for a very long time, and even though I was acting and singing here, when I would be back at school, you know, it felt like another country, essentially. Anyway, kind of going off on a tangent here, but essentially what I'm trying to say is I think it's always easier to complain than do something about your frustration. So if you guys feel like you guys have the capacity to make some sort of impact, to bring about some sort of change, really try to do something, you know, really try to implement what you believe, and see if you can help contribute to positive changes in this country. And remember that the methods you take might, the methods you choose to take might have to be adjusted in accordance to the cultural context here, what people believe in. So, you know, sometimes we have to let our ego down and realize that whatever we thought worked in the UK, in the US, and Australia, wherever you may have been, might not work here. But, you know, change is not easy. So if you really have the passion to bring about positive change, realize that it's going to take a lot of effort, but I think it's going to be worthwhile. And, you know, you may struggle in the beginning. You might go through emotional fluctuations, but that's the price of wanting to bring about real change. Yep. So that's what I want to say.
And that's on period.
Yeah. And, you know, do things in your own way. Like Indah's doing an amazing job. Like, you know, some people might think, oh, why are you doing this podcast in English? Just do it in Indonesian. But no, like you are touching a certain demographic that may be kind of out of tune with what's happening in Indonesia, but you're giving them a context and making them realize what's happening here. And with me, I've decided to go the other way. You know, I've decided to learn the language and really try to reach a different demographic so that they can be privy to the information that we are privy to. So like we all have our own ways, and you know, nothing's better than the other. There's no wrong or right, but like just realize that it'll require research, it'll require hard work, and the path ain't easy, but it'll be worth it.
Yep. Yeah. I think that was very, very well put. Also, I'm so glad you said that because I'm glad. Oh, I'm glad you see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm glad you see it. God, I'm so relieved. And I think that is it for this episode, you guys. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
I really, really appreciate you coming on this show. Nah, because it's hard to get people on. I appreciate, like, you know, like I've been able to like get like, you know, bigger names, like for example, like William, right? Like after our Puella event, like, and I'm just like,
thanks to me.
Thanks to you, thanks to this bitch right here.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, thank you for coming on because it's hard to get people on.
Thank you for feeding me.
You full?
Yes, I'm full. And I realized that I was super low in energy before because I was actually hangry. I'm a lot happier now. Look at me. I'm smiling. I'm able to speak. So thank you for having me on the show. Honestly, you know, I've known about you for quite some time. I've always loved the things you put out. And, you know, I've always wanted to be a part of this community. But I think because of my childhood trauma, I was always under the impression that international kids in Jakarta didn't want to have anything to do with me. I think it's just, you know, I know it's not true, but like it's something that's lingered for a very long time. But now that you've introduced me to this world, I hope you guys out there just come up to me when you see me. You know, don't have preconceived notions. Just we're nice. We don't bite.
We really
come say hi.
We really don't bite.
Yeah,
I bark. I don't bite. I think that is it for today's episode, you guys. Be sure to like, comment, and fucking subscribe, you cunts. That's the outro. Bye.